Hi, I'm Teresa and I'm a tutor. And today we're talking about how to tell what level of a book your kid is reading. So there's many different ways to tell if your child is reading at grade level. I mean, the obvious one is to get your kid tested. This typically happens in elementary school at the beginning and near the end of the school year, mostly so that you can track your child's growth over the course of the year. But that doesn't help you if you're in a bookstore or at a library and you don't know if that book right there is the right lexicon. I mean, you could definitely look up a particular book's Lexile score just to see what it is. But if you're actually interacting with your child, you're going to the library and you're picking up a book and seeing if it's something that's like an appropriate level for them, that can be a little clunky to do. We don't have time to always look up Lexile scores or to check it in the point system for your child's school, but you can always look at the book. Looking at a book isn't a guarantee that it's the absolute accurate level for your kid, but it's good enough because here's the thing. Any book that your child is picking up and reading isn't a bad thing, but some books that are way too hard or way too easy aren't necessarily a good thing either. Because although there's no bad thing with your child reading a book that's 3 grade levels below where they're actually reading, there isn't really a benefit if the goal is to get them reading better. The reason I am doing this is because I actually had an experience. A student of mine who was in 3rd grade at the time brought home a book that nobody thought might have been too hard for her. It was a comic book and it had an adventure with pirates and buried treasure and stuff. And I was the one who was actually trying to read it with her. She was trying to tell me what was happening in the book, but I noticed right away she wasn't reading the little speech bubbles. She was trying to tell me based on the pictures, and she was making a lot of stuff up. So we actually started reading it and reading the words. And once we got to the word cache or cache, C-A-C-H-E, I think it's pronounced cache, like a cache of weapons. She started crying because crying is frustration. And she wasn't understanding so many of the words. And I was looking at it. It was totally a 5th grade reading level, 2 grades too hard. And everybody thought it was going to be easy because it was a comic book. But it wasn't. The words were too hard. So I explained this to the parents, but they, the teacher, and the librarian had all looked at this book, just given it a perfunctory look, and was like, yeah, she could totally read this. And by the way, a quick note about comic books. Most comic books are not written for little kids. Most comic books, especially if you're getting like DC and Marvel comic books, are written for teenagers and adults, not kids. Definitely look at any comic books that your child is bringing home. But this also bears the question of, is this book too hard for your kid? And is this one going to be of a benefit if they're trying to read to improve their reading skills? Now, the best way to figure out if a book is too easy or too hard for your kids is have them read the first page. Read it out loud and see how many words they struggle with. They should only struggle with 2-ish words per page for picture books. If it's a chapter book, they can struggle with like 3 or 4, but not too many more than that. They should be able to generally read it fairly smoothly. If they've got a few words that are a little struggle, that's perfect because that will be a level that will help them build up their reading skills just that little bit more. But what should your kid be reading at a particular grade level, right? Well, I have examples. Most examples. I do not have a few of the books. I will put up pictures here if I can. And a quick caveat, this is only through elementary school. Sixth grade and beyond, honestly, the words don't typically get much harder. The concepts and the deeper meanings do. But by sixth grade, they should be able to pick up any book and understand the words. So that's why I kind of stopped this at fifth grade. Sixth grade and seventh grade, depending on where you're at, starts counting as middle school. And by then, your kids should be pretty strong in terms of reading and understanding most words. So let's start with preschool. Preschoolers don't read. The typical preschooler is working on becoming familiar with the alphabet and their numbers. They may have most of the alphabet memorized before kindergarten. Preschool is not required, and to this day, kindergarten is the first required grade level. So if your kid's not going to preschool, it doesn't matter. They don't have to. But you need to be doing a lot of that pre-work at home, which is just getting them familiar with the alphabet and their numbers up through 10. In kindergarten, kids start by learning the alphabet and their numbers, and then they work up from there. They start by recognizing the letters and the sounds, and then they work up to short words. By the end of kindergarten, your child should be able to read books with 3 to 5 word sentences and most words that are 3 or fewer letters. With the occasional 4-letter word, not swear words, I actually mean things like walk, talk, and that kind of stuff. Those kind of simple words. See Jane Run is a classic example of this. A few months into first grade, your child should be able to read level 1 readers. They're the ones with the little blue level 1 sign. Ignore my puppy. She's trapped in here with me because she wanted to hang out and then found out I was going to be boring. But around the first couple of months of kindergarten, your child should be able to read a level 1 reader. About midway through first grade, your child should be able to elevate to a level 2 reader, which has a little bit more dialogue and a little bit more that happens. If you look inside these books, the lettering is usually pretty big because little kids are not very well developed. Their brains are actually at the very beginning stages of their brain development. Because remember, human brains don't fully finish developing until we're 25. First and second grade kids have really poor eye control and very poor motor control. That's why usually between second and third grade, a kid's handwriting really bumps up. And between second and third grade, they can go from reading big letters to reading smaller letters. You'll notice a theme through this: letter size is a big tell of about what level a book is for a kid. This is a good book. This is called Crane and Crane by Linda Joy Singleton. I actually know Linda. She went to my dance class for a long time. And this book has particularly big words, but it only has about 1 word per page. This is a pretty good book for first grade. These words are a little hard for a first grader, but it really teaches about different contexts for different words, like grab versus grab, because it's an animal crane versus a crane machine. So something like this is good for like the beginning of first grade to the middle. But the big emphasis with a lot of first grade books is the pictures, because the pictures really help to tell the story. By the end of first grade, and maybe the beginning of second, because typically a kid is in the same reading spot at the end of a grade versus the beginning of the next, you want books that have a little bit more to it. This, by the way, is an absolutely delightful book I was just introduced to. I borrowed this from my husband's grandmother. But as you can see, this is about the level 2 reader is kind of like this, where they'll have still pretty big letters and words. And then they've got quite a bit of space between. You're probably going to have 3-ish, 2 to 4 sentences per page. And they're typically short. And aside from very common words like days of the week, morning, or evening, most of the words are not particularly difficult. And you're going to have, again, the pictures. This is kind of the end of first grade right here, beginning of second grade. As your child improves in second grade, you're going to notice that the spacing becomes a little bit closer. This is Alexander and his terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. And you'll notice that the spacing becomes a little bit closer. You might wind up with a little bit more words, a little bit more difficult words starting to pop in. You're going to get more of the 5 to 7 letter words happening in second grade. And then by the end of second grade, the picture books your child is reading should have full-on paragraphs. This is an absolutely wonderful book. And as you can see, you get full-on paragraphs. There's a lot to actually read here. And the stories usually have a lot more structure, a lot more fairy tale-like structure with a solid beginning, a middle, and an end, and a plot that actually happens through the entire thing. I love this author, Patricia Polacco. My favorite one is Thundercake, but I can't find my copy of it. This one, and Thundercake's a better example because Thundercake is definitely an end of second grade book because it has some really hard words and harder concepts to understand. Something else that happens, usually the end of second grade or the beginning of third grade, is reading chapter books. By third grade, your child should definitely be into chapter books. Magic Tree House is a really good starter chapter book series. They are really not thick. Like if you look between this and this, it's really not much thicker. And there are some books like Where the Wild Things Are, which is probably thicker than this book, honestly. Here, Where the Wild Things Are. It's even thicker than the chapter book. It has much better art than the chapter book, though. But beginning chapter books should have pretty big writing for chapter books. Also, you will get the occasional, usually 1 or 2 per chapter, picture. And usually these pictures are pretty full page when they pop up. This is the first Magic Tree House book. Good starting place. So you can read the Magic Tree House books in any order. So these are pretty easy. And something you'll notice with these books, as well as all the picture books, is there's a lot of repetition. So, for example, my favorite, which is Hecate Peg. They say the children's names, which are Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, about, like no joke, 8 to 10 times, maybe a dozen. It pops up through the entire thing. So there's a lot of repetition in these books, and that is no different in this book. That repetition is what makes these books a skill builder. And a quick note, if you get the Magic Tree House book set, like the first 4 books, and read them through, you'll probably find that by the time your child gets to the 4th one, they'll be reading at this level a lot better. And also when you make the switch before you read the first chapter book, actually explain things about how chapter books work, like how you can stop at the end/beginning of a chapter, and how there's usually like a table of contents so you can find the specific chapter you want, prologue and epilogue if that applies, those kinds of things, because they look very daunting because they have a lot of words on a page, even if the words are not necessarily any harder than the other books your child has been reading. They're kind of at the stage where the more words on a page means harder the book is, even though that isn't necessarily always the case. As your child moves through third grade and into fourth grade, you're going to notice that the chapter books that become a little harder also become a little thicker. I've got 2 books here that could be third and fourth grade, and they look particularly thick because they're hardcover. Paperbacks are, of course, going to be thinner, but they wind up having more words and fewer pictures. Stuart Little. I think that Stuart Little's a little bit more fourth grade. Let's read this one. Well, let's not read it. Let's just open it up and show you a random page. But you see how these are getting definitely more words. They're getting fewer pictures, and if you do see pictures, they are only partial pages. Most of the books are about 1.5 to double space, so they're still a little bit bigger font, but there's a lot more to it. Also, you'll notice that aside from this one has a lot more of the bigger words like Greenwich, Palace, and a lot of names like the River Thames. That might be a little bit difficult, but that's also because this is a historical novel. It's a novelization of Queen Mary I. But the other words are not particularly hard. And if you read them, they start sounding a little bit more like modern common language. Don't be afraid of him, Salisbury comforted. Your mother, the queen, has made it plain that he is not to lay a hand upon you. Like, none of those words are hard. Most of the words are 5 letters or fewer, with the occasional name or something that's a little bit trickier. Stuart Little. This one is an older book. It's a classic. It was first published in 1945, so this is where things start getting a little trickier to identify grade level, because the words might be a little bit hard just because it's not really a style of writing that is done anymore. But this is definitely a younger kid's book because it does have little half-page pictures. Fourth grade is the last grade I noticed that actually has pictures in the book. A very common book for fourth grade readers and above is the Diary of a Wimpy Kid series. And this is one of those books where if you look up the grade level for it, they're going to say 4th grade to 12th grade or 4th grade to 10th grade, depending on the source. Here's the thing, that is not the reading level of the book. The entire Diary of a Wimpy Kid book series is a solid 4th grade. Like mid 4th grade, most 5th graders really get into the series. And there's a couple of ways to tell that it's actually a 4th grade reading level. One of them, just like in Stuart Little, pictures. There are pictures that take up to half of a page. Some pages actually have very little writing on them. And there's a lot of space in between. The words are not particularly hard, and a lot of the concepts are pretty basic as well. The reason a lot of these sources say that it goes up to 10th or 12th grade is because that's the target demographic. That's the marketing age. That's not the actual reading level. Because the kid in the book starts off in middle school. I don't think they specify 6th or 7th grade. So they leave that kind of ambiguous. So you can kind of define that on your own based on your kid and what your school district does, whether middle school starts in 6th or 7th grade. So here's one other interesting tell what grade level a book is actually written at. The main protagonist's age is either the same age or a year or 2 higher than the age of the kid who's supposed to be reading it. So this is very telling with Diary of a Wimpy Kid because he's just starting middle school, which could be 6th or 7th grade. So this kid could be as young as 10 or as old as 12. It is really meant for kids who are about 8, 9, or 10, which is about 4th grade, 5th grade level. And, you've got the slow readers who could be in 5th or 6th grade. Harry Potter is another prime example. Harry Potter's reading level goes up as you read further and further into the series. Harry Potter starts at 11 years old. Advanced 9-year-olds, 10-year-olds, or 11-year-olds are really meant to be reading that book. Now, the concepts and everything are very broad, and the characters are very interesting, so it can pull different demographics. But the real group that it is targeted to is 5th graders and 6th graders. And if you've got a kid who's not so advanced in 9th grade, starting Harry Potter at that grade is a little hard. And as the series progresses, Harry is 11 in the first book, he's 12 in the second book, 13 in the third, etc., etc., etc. And you actually have some very dark themes starting in the fourth book, which is 14-year-olds who are typically in 9th grade at that point. So as your kid ages, they're going to age up into the reading demographic for the other books, because they definitely require an emotional maturity that does not necessarily exist when a kid picks up the first book. Now, 5th grade. I have already shown this book once before, but you'll see that there become even more words on the page. The words are getting even smaller, and usually the spacing is a little bit close together. Usually a little bit more along the lines of single or 1.5 spacing. And no pictures. The only pictures you'll see are the little images at the beginning of chapters. Not really any actual pictures. We're not counting the maps that might exist at the beginning or end of the book. And at this point, because the kid's expected to be around 10 years old, there can be violence. Now, it's not going to be graphic violence, and you're probably not going to get any kissing or anything in the content for the romance. You're probably at most going to get, if two characters really like each other, they might hold hands or something, or hug. You're getting a little bit more mature themes, and the story is a lot more complex. Like, look at how thick this is, and this is a paperback. So that's what you can kind of expect to see. Also, a quick note, most Newbery Award-winning books are around about a 5th or a 6th grade reading level. Books like Bridge to Terabithia, The Keys, The Hatchet, The Isle of Blue Dolphins. These are all books that are geared towards 5th grade reading level, and a lot of deep and serious stuff seems to happen in these books. You're going to get a lot more tearjerkers starting in 5th grade, and a lot of books that have deeper, more philosophical meanings. And from here, the words are pretty much what you can expect in any novel. You might still get the occasional picture, like this one has a picture. This is Bridge to Terabithia. But you can see the difference in these words. They're longer, they're harder as well. So like, it hardly bothered Jess. He knew that a girlfriend was somebody who chased you on the playground and tried to grab you and kiss you. He could no more imagine Leslie chasing a boy than he could imagine Mrs. Double Chin Myers shinnying up the flagpole. Like, you can see how we're going to more complex words, more letters per word, longer sentences, more compound and complex sentence structures. And yeah, these books don't necessarily have to be thick. Like, these are both pretty solid 5th grade reading levels, and one is thick and one is thin. That's not an indicator anymore. Anyway, I hope you found this helpful. If someone hasn't told you lately, you are doing a good job. Bye.